I'm going to open proceedings by saying thanks for your attendance, thanks for coming. We're going to have a fun kind of 90 minutes or so. But before we kind of get into all of that, hands up those of you that have been to one of our In a Word luncheons before. Just hands up. All right, okay, cool, awesome. So this is I think this is our 5th luncheon. We actually started with Hacked, which was looking at security, online security and so on. We did CSR, Community Social Responsibility in large companies. We've looked at hiring. And then we did opioids, looking at the what's going on in Virginia relative to the opioid epidemic that we're facing. So we thought it was time to lighten things up. So hence the reason we're talking about alcohol. Yay! From opioids to alcohol. Great. Now, before we get started, I am going to invite Delegate Jennifer Boysko to the stage for a couple of seconds. She is going to do something rather special. So, Jennifer, would you like to come up, please?
Eileen Curtis has given a substantial portion of her life to the Dulles Chamber, and the General Assembly in Virginia, the entire state, wanted to recognize her enormous contribution to our economic prosperity in Virginia, but also to make Virginia a better place for everybody. So I invite Eileen to join me, and if you all will indulge me and allow me to read to her the proclamation that was passed by the entire General Assembly, I would be so grateful. I might need your help. So, there's a joke that we often say that in the General Assembly there's not often unanimous consent to do anything, but everybody agreed that Eileen has done an amazing job, and so it was with unanimous consent. And so I will read it. Whereas Eileen Curtis, a respected leader who served as President and Chief Executive Officer of the Dulles Regional Chamber of Commerce for 23 years, retired in July 2017 following a distinguished career. Whereas a New Jersey native, Eileen Curtis earned a master's degree from the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. During her early career, she served as the Director of Music and Cultural Affairs at WGMS Radio in Rockville, Maryland. Whereas in 1994, Eileen Curtis took the reins as President and Chief Executive Officer of the Dulles Regional Chamber of Commerce. During her 23-year tenure with the organization, it has grown into one of the largest chambers of commerce in the Washington, D.C. area. Whereas an enthusiastic and visionary leader, Eileen Curtis tirelessly marshaled the resources of the Dulles Regional Chamber of Commerce to benefit the business community of Northern Virginia. Among other initiatives, she emphasized diversity, guided the Chamber in addressing 21st century issues related to science and biotechnology, and launched Innovate, an annual one-day conference welcoming the economic opportunities of change. And whereas Eileen Curtis also forged partnerships with 6 local high schools to help prepare the workforce of tomorrow, and was instrumental in persuading the board of the Dulles Regional Chamber of Commerce to embrace the platform of immigration reform. Whereas Eileen Curtis has received numerous honors and accolades during her career, including the Women of the Year Award from the Herndon Business and Professional Women's Club, the Chamber of Executive of the Year Award from the Virginia Association of Chambers of Commerce Executives, and the Peabody Award from Broadcast Journalism. Whereas, with continuing to serve as a consultant to the Dulles Regional Chamber of Commerce, Eileen Curtis plans to spend her retirement traveling, volunteering, writing books. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Delegates and the Senate concurring that the General Assembly hereby commend Eileen Curtis for her 23-year stewardship of the Dulles Regional Chamber of Commerce on the occasion of her retirement, and be it further resolved that the Clerk of the House of Delegates prepare a copy of this resolution for presentation to Eileen Curtis as an expression of the General Assembly's admiration for her outstanding service to the business community. There be it resolved, House patrons Jennifer Boysko, Don Adams, Patrick Hope, Hurst, Krizak, Plum, Simon and Turpin from the House, and from the Senate, Adam Eben, Janet Howell, Dave Marsden, and Lionel Spruill. Thank you so much for all that you have done for not only for our community, but all of Virginia and for all the residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I must say, the legislator is very wordy, but I appreciate it all, and it is so nice to see you all again, so many of my friends from so many years. I miss you all, and I wish you all good fortune in the years ahead, and guess that's it. Thank you. Thank you.
Could you please welcome our very first guest, Kelly Hinkle. Come on up, Kelly. Give her a round, please. I'm not going to explain who Kelly is, because she's going to do that. Here's your mic. Can I get you a drink? What would you like? We have a range of waters.
Yeah, exactly. Could I have a fermented, a little bit like blonde water?
I've got a blonde with a little taste of IPA thrown in.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah? Would you like it with or without ice today?
No ice.
No ice. Oh, by the neck?
Cowboy it.
All right, good. So I've not done this before as a barman, but I think I might
Can anyone
try.
tell he hasn't done it before?
Yeah. So good. Well, thank you, Kelly. Let's start by, would you please explain to us what your title is? Because I read the title. It's a very interesting title.
So I am the Agricultural Development Officer for Loudoun County Department of Economic Development.
And what does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? So my mom didn't even understand what that meant, I think, until there was Facebook. Now I think she gets what I do every day, but she still thinks, why do they pay you to do that? I am responsible for the team at the Loudoun County Department of Economic Development that works with our agricultural-based and rural businesses. And what has happened over the last probably 10 years is a lot of those businesses are making alcohol. So one of our top sectors in Loudoun has become the winery, brewery, distillery industry. So mostly I work with the farm side of the industry, and I work with our existing businesses to help retain those businesses and help those businesses expand, and then also to attract new businesses into Loudoun County.
So how many of these businesses are there currently in this county? You knew I was going to ask you that question,
Well,
didn't
so
you? You can make it up, because nobody can challenge
I'm not going to make it up. I'm not going to make up the numbers. And to be honest, I looked at the numbers this morning before I left the office, because every week someone asks me that question, it feels like the answer changes. So today, Loudoun County has 48 wineries. We have 2 additional wineries with pending licenses, and we have 4 wineries in planning. So we expect by January of 2019 that we will have 54 wineries in Loudoun County. On the brewery side, we have 31 breweries today. We have 6 with pending licenses and 6 in planning. So January of 2019, we expect to have 43 breweries in Loudoun County. The numbers for distilleries are easier. Scott Harris with Catoctin Creek will be up here shortly. We have 2 distilleries in Loudoun County, and Catoctin Creek was the lone distillery for about, 5 years? Yeah, and so we only have 2, and Scott can probably talk to you. I won't steal his thunder, but he can talk to you about why we only have 2 when we're in double digits with the wineries and breweries.
And how does that compare with where I'm from? Well, I'm from England, which is different, but from where I live, which is in Maryland. So what's the sort of volume there?
Yeah, so you're putting me in a rock and a hard place. I actually live in Maryland and have lived there for 14 years, and I live in Frederick, and I have gone to my elected officials and said, you are making my job easy in Loudoun County. In Frederick County, we have probably 6 breweries, probably 12 wineries, and that winery number hasn't changed in about 5 years. And, people ask me all the time, how are you doing what you're doing in Loudoun? And, the first answer is make it a business-friendly regulatory environment. And businesses will open. Make it predictable, make it simple, and make it cheap.
So what's the difference then in terms of regulations and licensing? I know we have this strange thing in this country where you can't drink until you're 21, which is unusual in my experience. And whether that's the right thing or not, James is giggling. But what sort of licenses and regulations do you find help or hinder the business in Loudoun County?
Well, in Virginia, initially, farm wineries had a lot of privileges that commercial wineries don't have. And part of that was because we wanted to incentivize these businesses to grow grapes and to purchase grapes grown in Virginia. So with your farm winery license, you get privileges to be able to use a virtual distribution system through Virginia. So it's essentially a website, and your buyer goes to the website and orders, and the winery itself can deliver that product to the restaurant, the hotel, whatever it is. The breweries and the distilleries don't have that privilege. I'm hoping that we can get there someday with the farm distilleries and farm breweries. So self-distribution on the wine side is something that has been helpful. A couple years ago, the first change in legislation was that a brewery could actually serve you a pint of beer to consume on site. So before that, we didn't, it wasn't a surge of breweries. Now the breweries can serve you a pint to drink on site. And then, we expanded and added a definition which is essentially a farm brewery, but they call it a limited license brewery. So the idea that the state actually, the first piece of legislation on farm breweries, the state said, localities, you must allow these on land zoned agricultural. So they forced the hand of the localities that were dragging their feet, essentially. So, the General Assembly has been very friendly to agriculture and to alcohol. And, we've, 3 governors in a row, like their beer, like their wine. So it honestly, in most cases, starts in Richmond and then filters down to the local level. Mm-hmm. And Scott can talk to you more about legislation that he personally championed in Virginia to be able to get to where he is in his business.
Thank you. That's a really good question. You can prepare. So tell us a little bit about how you work with companies in the region, in the chamber, outside the chamber.
So in Loudoun, our chamber is incredibly supportive of business, obviously, and incredibly supportive of our farm-based businesses and our agricultural businesses. We work with, like I said before, we work with our businesses, that exist in the county to keep them healthy and to retain those businesses. My job is the agricultural development officer, so my job is to meet with our breweries and our wineries and distilleries and facilitate them using local agricultural products. So Scott can talk to you about what he's doing locally, but initially the grain producer that he's working with, I worked with them, and we're really trying to keep our alcohol industry in Loudoun rooted in agriculture. That's my big tie-in to the industry. Because honestly, when we first started getting a boom of commercial breweries in the county, and our director came to me and he said, look, you got to work these commercial projects. And I was like, no, those are not on farms. That's not my thing. I'm the farm girl. I'm going to wear jeans to talk about alcohol in front of the Dulles Chamber. So he looked at me and he said, you are a resource and you are an asset that this department has, and you have the expertise in the alcohol industry. And I thought, oh gosh, I need to call my mom and tell her I'm the expert on alcohol in the office. and so I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. I'm going to do it begrudgingly. But it's been wonderful. And I love all the breweries and all the wineries and all the distilleries, no matter where they are in Loudoun, and honestly, no matter where they are in Virginia. They're a great group of people, but my primary goal with each of those businesses is to get them to use local agricultural products.
Okay. So at this point, I'd like to introduce you to our resident barfly. This is Sharon Myers, who is the Director of Catering in her spare time at Westfield's Marriott. Right?
Yeah.
So tell us what you think about what you've heard so far. What insights do you have, Sharon?
Well, I think it's exciting. I mean, it's nice because I actually...
Do you have a mic?
I do not.
Let's get you a mic.
Okay, sure. Is this on? Great. Can you hear me? So I live in Loudoun County, and I work in Fairfax County, so it's kind of nice. I get to see across counties and participate in many wineries in Loudoun, and I think it's just amazing to see the growth that has happened in the county with economic development and the different agriculture. It's really incredible, and it really it's nice to keep things local. I think that really helps everybody. We'll talk a little more too, but I mean, in my hotel, we also like to source local products as well, even though Marriott's a big company and we have certain things we do use, but we like to source local products. So we'll talk later. Sean's Beer is in our hotel, so that's awesome, Mustang Sally's. And we'll be talking later maybe with wineries, and Scott's been at our hotel to showcase his product. So it's really nice to be able to have these resources and work locally with everyone.
So Kelly, I know you brought a very large crystal ball with you today. Thank you for doing so. You've been doing this job for how long?
8 years.
8 years. So in 8 years, so where do you think this market will be, the economic impact will be in another 8 years?
I think I don't need too much of a crystal ball to see the future. Loudoun's winery industry really started coming on board in about 1999, and we saw a lot of growth in those first 10 years. And in the last 8 years, we've really leveled off. So in the last 8 years, we've added 7 new wineries. But in the last 3 years, we've added 30 new breweries. So there's no reason for us to not assume that the brewery industry is going to follow the winery industry. And to be honest, I expect it to start leveling off in 2019. I don't expect the department to be adding, 15 breweries a year in 2019. It's going to start trickling in, kind of like the winery sector is now. We have 2 pending and 4 more next year, so that's a good year. 4 in a year right now for wineries is good. I think in 2019 they may add 2 or 3 more breweries, and then maybe 1 or 2 every year after that. So it'll level off. Every time I do an interview with a reporter, they ask me, how many breweries can Loudoun County handle? And I look to the winery industry as an example, because our winery, we will have almost 50 wineries, and if we can sustain 50 wineries, why can't we sustain 50 breweries? And those businesses are in very different areas in the county. All of our wineries are in the west. 75% of our breweries are in the east. So they are different demographics just because of geography. So I think we're going to continue to see the wineries really just leveling off, and then the breweries will continue to level off. Unless legislation changes in Richmond, we won't be adding more distilleries. And again, Scott can talk about that.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much. Of course, the big unknown is whether Amazon will bring their own brewery if they were to come to Virginia, Northern Virginia. So thank you very much, Kelly. We're going to hear from you a little bit later. Please grab your beverage and leave the mic and have a seat over there. So let's now welcome Sean Hunt, who is the owner of Mustang Sally Brewing Company. You're very welcome, Sean. Hi. Now, Sean and I and Kelly and I were not able to have a chat before this, so I've got a few questions which you know the answer to. I know this, but we haven't had a chance to rehearse. So I wanted to start by asking you, where did you get the name?
I first wanted to open up the brewery back when I first got out of college, and there were 2 things that were significant to me when I got out of college. I was brewing beer with a friend, and I was sailing a sailboat in the bay, and the sailboat's name was Mustang Sally.
Oh, so it has nothing to do with the song?
So nothing to do with the song. It's kind of funny. When we first opened up the brewery, everybody wanted the logo to be a rearing horse, a P-51 Mustang, a Ford Mustang, and none of that came into it, and it has nothing to do with the song.
Okay, good. So you all know the song, right? I'm going to ask you to sing it shortly. We have here one of your beers at the bar. I don't have an opener. I'm very sorry. Otherwise, you've got one? Yeah. Kelly's. Are we allowed to open it here, Mrs. Licensing Person? So.
Ask for forgiveness.
Yes, exactly. Well, what do I know? I'm English. So tell us. So you said you came out of college. You went straight into opening a brewery, which is the dream of most people, I would think, who are in college now, right? And how old were you at the time?
So the chain of events was a lot different than that.
Okay, good. Please explain.
So came out of college, I wanted to open a brewery, and I did what I think most people do, which is they put off their dream for a long period of time. So I was coming out of college, I was an engineer for about 3 seconds. I went to law school. I've been a corporate securities lawyer for about 20 years. And the whole time, I really wanted to open up that brewery. That was truly my dream. So about maybe 3.5 years ago, seriously started giving some thought to it. And I got to a point where, I was either going to, pull the trigger or not. And in that moment of weakness, I actually opened up the brewery.
And how old were you, if you don't mind me asking, when you had that moment of weakness?
So I was in my late 40s.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't when you were 21. No. Good. Because I actually can relate, because I did something very similar. When I was at boarding school in England, I had one of those party brewing kits behind the walls in the, don't tell any of all the priests, please. But I had this going on at the time in England behind the scenes. So, but I don't admit that to anybody on a microphone. So tell us about the challenges you faced when you switched career. You obviously had a successful career before that. You decided to take the plunge. What were the challenges you faced at that time?
So we're in Fairfax County. I know that so 2 of us, I think, are Loudoun County, and 2 of us are in Fairfax County. I was a long-time resident of Fairfax County, so I was actually born out of country. I moved here before I could remember a thing. Grew up in Fairfax County, moved away for a little while to Germany, and then came back and have always been in the county. So for me, it was very important to be in the county. I truly wanted this business to be located in Fairfax County. Fairfax County, it's an enormous county, 1.3 million people. There's a population, very few breweries, especially at the time that we were thinking about it. But it was challenging for a couple of different reasons. From a regulatory perspective, and the county has worked on this with us, but from a regulatory perspective, we were an animal that they just really hadn't seen before. So we were proposing to have we're a fairly large brewery. We're in about 15,000 square feet of space. Our system, when we brew a beer, we brew about 1,000 gallons at a time. When we ferment beers, we ferment in multiples of 1,000. So it's a large production facility, but then we also wanted to have a large tasting room. And then when they looked at us as an institution, they saw kind of a schizophrenia. On the one hand, we were supposed to be a light manufacturing facility. On the other hand, we were supposed to be a tasting room. And they had a hard time trying to bridge those 2 things from a regulatory perspective. So as they were doing the zoning, they tried to squeeze us into one or the other category. And one of the challenges was that we don't squeeze into one or the other category. We're both things. And so they worked with us on that. And ultimately, they overcame it. I know the county, from a zoning perspective, has smoothed the decision to zone by right certain brewery operations that look more like us, right? Kind of a mixed-use, light manufacturing, tasting room kind of an operation. They do it, it's capped. We presented an additional challenge for them because we really didn't have a cap in terms of what our capacity is. So the challenge for the county, I think, with us is that we were going to brew at a fairly large capacity, and we also had a very large tasting room. Those 2 things they wound up overcoming, and they adjudicated it, by right. So that's just purely from a regulatory perspective. There are other future things that we can talk about in a moment if you'd like. The other thing was just natural barriers to entry. So Fairfax County, our ceilings are 24 feet. We need loading docks, and we need a lot of parking. Those 3 things are very difficult to find in a building in Fairfax County. Once you exceed about 18 feet in ceiling height, it's probably been redeveloped. If it hasn't been redeveloped, it probably was an older building that had very little parking. And if it didn't have one of those two defects, almost certainly you were not going to get the loading dock that you needed. So that physical barrier to entry was difficult for us, and we spent a lot of time trying to find a facility that would actually satisfy those three core criteria, and then the fourth core criteria was that it just felt right. So it took us the better part of a year just to find the location, and that's after most of the planning that had occurred for the brewery.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, you mentioned there are a number of, Kelly actually mentioned there's lots of breweries now. How do you define your type of brewery? The word is craft brewery, microbrew, and who is your competition, and how do you work with them?
Yeah, there's a lot in that. So when I look at breweries, kind of 30,000 foot level, I would look at mainstream breweries, regional breweries, and then more local craft breweries. Right, that would probably be the big categorical way to look at it. Mm-hmm. And then within the local craft breweries, I think you would look at it as breweries that primarily run a brewery operation locally, in a tasting room, a brewery that may do a limited amount of draft distribution, and then ultimately maybe a brewery that would distribute more volume in draft and more volume in package in retail stores.
Okay, right. And with the competition, do you have a cooperative with them, or you work with them, or are they strictly competition? How do you ensure the business grows as a group?
Yeah, so this is kind of an interesting thing. I was a lawyer that primarily worked in tech. That was what I grew up in. Tech, so to me, the brewing industry now is a lot like what the tech industry was probably 20, 25 years ago. So a very young industry. It looked a little bit more collaborative. And now I look at the brewing industry, and it's still a young industry. It is very much collaborative. But that's where I think they part ways. On the tech side, it got very competitive very quickly. And it was a much more complicated industry, I think, that's a big, broad, tech industry. But a lot more came into play. A lot more contract rights, a lot more IP rights, a lot more of the due diligence items that you see in a corporation that I think are a little bit easier when it comes to more of a simple, stupid, light manufacturing process. On the brewery side, I think the other element about that is that the culture is extremely strong and extremely collaborative. So Melissa and Jason are here from Lake Ann Brew House, and they are right down the street from me, and they are great. And that would be the place that I would always want to go to, is the person that lives really close to them. We have 7 breweries in Fairfax County, super collaborative. We actually are having an event next week. It's a brew fest, and the brew fest is the Fairfax County Brew Fest, and we're doing it at our brewery. All the breweries are going to come on site. We're all going to collaborate. We've been talking about it for a while. They did special things to help us out with it. It's a really terrific industry. From a collaboration perspective, when one brewery is short on supplies, another brewery is always, willing to help them out. I do see the industry starting to tighten. I don't see the industry getting competitive with each other yet.
Okay, great. Let's bring in our barfly. Are you still here?
I am,
good.
Yes.
You know Sean from professional reasons with your hotel.
Yes.
Explain how you developed that relationship and how that helps him.
Yes. Well, I definitely, I know he's in the Wellingtons, which is our pub, and I believe a while ago you met with one of our directors or managers to just try to meet and try to bring in the local craft, and you could probably talk a little more about that. But I think it's great. A lot of our wedding parties and things, they want this craft beer, this local beer, and they really embrace that. And it's really exciting when you can see it. And the nice thing with something like Sean's product is you can change out the product and when they have seasonal beers and different items that go into it. So I think it really just allows us to have more flexibility and more offerings in the bar.
Mm-hmm. Good. I think it's an important thing, yes.
This is exactly why I think, a local craft brewery makes a ton of sense. And going forward, I think it's the reason why I think it's going to continue to be a growth pattern. The Westfields Marriott, where Sharon is, and us, we collaborate in a lot of different ways. So I've gotten to know several of your event managers, and when you guys have events either at the Marriott or at the brewery, we'll collaborate on those things. We are at Wellington's, which is great. You and I have been collaborating ever since the brewery's been open, because we, through the chamber, run an event, the Brew Fest, that we do at our brewery, but we co-host that with the chamber. And your involvement with the chamber has been terrific. So all those links and relationships are fabulous, and that's what I think makes local tick.
Yeah.
And that's without even tasting the stuff. That's just working on it. So talking of the stuff, you have, I think, a number of different brews with you today. And you mentioned earlier to me that some of them are award-winning. Would you explain how you get those awards, and who adjudicates the awards? Who gives you the awards? Which body?
Yeah, so we are a larger brewery, so we operate in all three, I'll call them channels, right? So channel 1 is our tasting room, channel 2 is that we distribute and draft, and then channel 3 is that we distribute six-packs to retail. The way that we organize our beers is to support those three channels. We have cores, and those cores would operate in all of the channels. We have certain draft products that are really intended to operate in the first two channels, right? The tasting room, and then for draft distribution. We spend a lot of our time, especially as a young brewery, getting credentials in those products of ours that are going to ultimately support all three of those channels. So the three six-packs that are on the table over there, those are our three core beers. We have an Article 1 Amber Lager, we have an Original Lager, which is a Dortmunder Export, a pale lager, and then we have Better Angels, which is an American IPA. With Article 1, there are different competitions that a brewery, I think, will engage in, but really we focus on probably three. And that's the Virginia Beer Cup, which is our state-run competition. There's the GABF, which is more of a national competition, and then there's World Beer Cup. And the World Beer Cup is kind of like World Cup for soccer. It's it's not every year. It's competitive. There's a lot of breweries producing a lot of great product out there, and so it is very competitive. We spend a lot of time on the reason we've developed cores is because we spend a lot of time over and over and over again just tweaking it and trying to make it a little bit better all the time. We wouldn't be able to do that if we were taking a draft product that we make once in a while. We just wouldn't be able to do the R&D that we do, similar to what our core products are. So for the cores, the Amber won gold in Virginia, the Original won bronze in Virginia. I know Lake Ann, they've won, I think, 4 medals in the last 2 years in Virginia. 5, sorry.
It's fine.
Yes,
as of today.
So far, right. So, it's great. We really, and I know, between Fairfax County and the Loudoun County breweries, they're fabulous. Those breweries, if you were just to look at what those breweries are offering, put aside even awards, across the board, I think they're doing a really terrific job.
Fantastic, and congratulations on your awards, and I hope you get a few more to catch up with them. Thank you very much, Sean. Please leave the mic. Can I get you a drink? Apparently I'm not very good at this. Yes? Yeah, look at this, something I prepared earlier. Cheers. Let's say cheers to Sean. Scott, are you still here? Come on up. Now, Scott Harris is the founder and general manager of the Catoctin Creek Distillery. If you go onto his website, there is a gentleman who will explain to you the 19 different ways you should not say Catoctin. Correct?
That's correct.
Am I saying it correctly?
Yes, you are.
Good.
Brits always do.
Oh, really? Oh, because we like our whiskey. All right, well, welcome.
Thank you.
Would you like a drink? You've got your own? Good. We have some amazing stuff up here, as you can see. Now, Scott brought this, right? So would you please tell us your story? How did you get, I know you're in the business with your wife, which I think is an amazing achievement in itself.
It is.
And is your wife here?
No, she's not here.
Good.
She's got to work.
I mean, not good, but I mean, she's running the place, yeah?
Let's talk about her.
Yeah. So, yeah, tell us how, when, why did you do this?
So Becky and I...
And any regrets, by the way?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, good.
So no regrets. Becky and I were both engineers. I was a computer engineer, so I worked most recently...
I forgot.
Even better. Thank you. Hello. I worked most recently in government contracting. So I had spent about 20 years in computer engineering and government contracting, and as I like to tell people, the short version is 20 years of that taught me a great love of drinking. And Becky was a chemical engineer, so Becky was working in manufacturing processes, doing basically taking research and development programs into mass production. So she worked with making contact lenses. You know, in the 90s, the progressive contact lenses were a new thing. She was working with that. The types of containers you take home food from the restaurant, all different kinds of things, computer parts and things like that. And I was doing programs for the US Navy, and as a person who starts in computers, you're doing very creative stuff, software, it's very creative. But as you get into management, we're doing more and more PowerPoint charts and things like that. And so I started to have a bit of a midlife crisis, being totally honest, turning about 40 at the time. And I was sitting at my desk visualizing if I could construct for myself a perfect version of hell, it would be sitting in this windowless cubicle under fluorescent light for the rest of my life doing this, making PowerPoint charts that people never read. And so I was like, I got to get out of here. And so I brought this idea to Becky of starting a distillery, and at the time, nobody was doing it because it's very, very hard. And we didn't know that. So naivete is, ignorance is bliss. And so I brought the idea to Becky, we should start a distillery. And I'm the ADD one in the family, and so Becky was like, yeah, that's great, be quiet, go away. And so for a few years, that was the case. And we'd go on trips to Europe, and we'd go visit distilleries, and I just couldn't let it go. And finally, Becky told me, look, if you want to start a distillery, then you need to write a business plan. And I was like, oh yeah, I do. And so I went and wrote a business plan, and she, finally I bring it to her to review, because basically the business plan was, let's take all the money we saved for the last 20 years and throw it into this business, cash it out of the stocks and throw it into this business, and oh, by the way, we have children who are just in middle school, and oh, by the way, it's 2008, so too big to fail, Lehman Brothers, all that stuff was happening, and we sort of felt a panic because our stocks were going down. We were like, we better use them before they're gone. And so she, being very wise, said, well, this is all great. Why don't you go to the bank and see if you can get a loan? And knowing that it was 2008 and too big to fail and all this, she would have been the supportive wife and said, yes, well, you know what, you tried, good job, but now go back to work and get back to your life. And the miracle, really, for us was the bank said yes. So we had a $250,000 loan in hand, and we kind of had to start. It's like, oh my gosh, this is real. We're going to do this now. And so we got started doing it together from there. Mm-hmm.
Interesting, because I actually had shares in Lehman, and that was the same time that I started with whiskey too.
Yeah.
And well, very brave. I would say you're very brave. You're both very brave, and I'm quite amazed that you actually did it. So that's when 2000.
That was roughly
when you
2000
opened the distillery.
And 2009 when we got financing.
Okay, so 9 years later on,
Yeah.
What have the challenges been? The successes? Where are you going with this?
As many of you own your own businesses or work in very small businesses, there's challenges every single day. We have challenges all the time. Kelly talked about one of them briefly, getting the right to serve our product in Virginia, having a tasting room, having the ability for customers to come in and sample our product. They could do it for wineries. Breweries really didn't exist yet when we started in any kind of large scale. Lost Rhino was just getting started as one of the first. So we could have people come in and visit our distillery, and they had all been programmed by what the experience was at the wineries. And there were still many wineries back then, like 40. So they expected to come into our place and have the same kind of service. And when we started, we had envisioned just manufacturing facility. We would be literally in our pajamas making whiskey and selling it to the Virginia ABC, which means shipping it to Richmond. We didn't need to see people, and people started showing up and asking for tours. And so we were like,
I guess I'll show you around. Sure, come on over,
Better get some new pajamas.
Yeah, so pardon my appearance. And so we had to get some laws changed. So SB 1249 in the 2011 session was the first one that allowed us to sell, to do tastings and to sell bottles in the distillery. That was key because it's a $50 product, right? And you don't want to just take it on faith. You need to taste it. Once you taste it, you're like, oh my gosh, that's great. Yes, I'll take a bottle, but you're not going to buy one sight unseen. So things like that were really, really important in the beginning.
And where are you selling now?
Every liquor store in the state of Virginia, Maryland, D.C., we're in about 26 states and about 4 countries.
And you're expanding the family business, so I understand, into a tiny little area of the southern part of America.
Yeah,
correct?
we actually are just expanding into Texas. We were talking at lunch. My 21-year-old son is now our new full-time sales ambassador to the great state of Texas, Austin, Texas. So if you guys are from Austin or you know people there, tell them to drink good Virginia rye whiskey.
Now, how are you managing to break into a market like Texas, or where the bourbon, that part of the country where bourbon is presumably, is this a bourbon?
This is a rye. So a lot of people misuse the word bourbon. Bourbon specifically means corn, but this is rye whiskey, which actually predates bourbon by about 100 years. Virginia is the birthplace of American whiskey. A lot of people don't realize that. So when this country was founded, when we were all Brits, we were all drinking rum, and then we had this, sort of
There's a basement here.
argument with you guys about our independence.
But we're over that. I just want you to know. So.
But I will say, at the time, all the settlers...
We celebrate on the 4th of July Dependence Day now.
That's right. Sometimes I think I'd like to come back. So
yes, you're welcome.
But we were all drinking rum, and then the Brits cut off the supply of rum after the Revolutionary War, so America had to find its own resources. And, of course, in the Mid-Atlantic, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Maryland, all the way up into Quebec, what grows very, very well is rye whiskey. And so rye was a very predominant whiskey in this area. George Washington was the largest commercial seller of rye whiskey during his lifetime. And so telling people that history is what our product is partly about. We like to tell people this was something important, and everybody forgot about it after Prohibition.
Now, you mentioned to me when we chatted before that this is a craft.
That's correct.
Would you define what you mean by that?
So it's a bit of a controversial term, craft whiskey. We talk about craft beer. I think everybody understands what craft beer is. Small, independent, family-run type businesses making things on a smaller scale than, say, Budweiser. With craft spirits, it's a bit controversial. But essentially, the thing that everybody kind of agrees upon is if you say a craft distiller, you're talking about a small family-run type operation like ours. We have 20 employees. My children work at the distillery. My wife is the distiller. I'm the guy who comes and does these things, so I don't do any real work. So as opposed to, everybody knows the term, or like products like Woodford Reserve and Jack Daniels and, Four Roses, Wild Turkey. And one of the big differences in the distilled spirits business, particularly in whiskey, as opposed to, say, in beer, is that the big guys make good stuff too. So in a lot of the beer culture is centered around the fact that, well, Budweiser stinks and I'm going to drink this instead. Well, you can't say that about Woodford Reserve. I mean, Woodford Reserve is a very fine product. And so the argument about the word craft comes from the fact, well, they're craftsmen too. They just have a bigger distribution network. Wouldn't we all like to have that? So I sort of, put a lot of caveats on the word craft. But I would say there are a lot of whiskeys out there in the market who pretend to be craft, who aren't doing anything except putting a fancy label on a bottle. And that is something I always try to educate people about. If you are buying a product that essentially came from a monster distillery in Indiana, was sold bulk and put into a bottle with nice labels, and then they charge you $90, you are a fool. That is a product that you could buy on the shelf for $20, but you're buying it because it's a fancy label. So let the buyer beware. If you spin the bottle around and on the back it says distilled and bottled by, then that means that maker made that product from
Distilled
scratch.
and bottled by Scott's son, it says.
Distilled and bottled by, yes. If it says anything else, so usually you'll see produced by or bottled by, or sometimes they get a little fancy and they'll say lovingly crafted and, whatever by. If it doesn't say distilled and bottled by, they didn't make it. It was made somewhere else, most likely in Indiana.
It says it on here, just so you know. So do you have a relationship with Scott professionally?
Yes.
You do? I feel very awkward asking this question,
Yes.
but
Well, so again, living in Loudoun County, I think we met in Loudoun. I was active in the Loudoun Chamber as well when I was working in Loudoun for other hotels in Loudoun. And Scott and I met through the Chamber and, had done some different events together. And then I actually called him, I think, a while ago when I first started at Westfields, wanted to bring you in to do a tasting. And I know you met some people in, again, my restaurant. And then I believe that we've done some other tastings. And, that's one thing that conferences come in and they want to have something unique. So a lot of times they'll do a whiskey tasting or a bourbon tasting, or, that's very popular. They want to do something else, kind of going along with cigars and bourbon or whiskey. So it's nice to have different resources to be able to accommodate the guests, and they're getting something, a local feel, which is really nice. So it's good, and we get, and I think, some different conferences, they want that unique local flavor to add to their, for their attendees.
great. All right. Well, thank you. Fascinating story. Very brave. I still think you're amazingly brave, to you and your wife. Congratulations. Please, would you join Sean over there? And last but no means least, please would you welcome Kirk Wiles. To the bar. See, the bar is all about building relationships. Have you noticed that? Have you ever been to a bar and met somebody new and perhaps then married them? How this happens? Well, that's why I'm trying to build relationships here.
Simon, I need a drink, actually.
You need a drink? What would you like? I got a distilled by Scott's son here, and I've got here.
A corkscrew.
That
need a
would be
corkscrew.
fabulous.
Is that all
Thank
right?
you. Yes,
Yeah?
that's perfect. Distilled, yes.
Kirk Wiles is the CEO and founder of Paradise Springs Winery. So that brings the trifecta together, wine. And you have also an incredibly interesting story. Would you tell it, please?
Sure. So I founded the winery in 2007 here in Fairfax County, and we were the first farm winery in Fairfax County. And I think we spoke a little bit about some of the challenges and the regulations of getting open, and just like Mustang Sally's, they kind of didn't know what to do with us. We were this anomaly in a zoning situation where we had a farm, we had an agriculturally zoned land.
But tell us about where this farm came from. That's the
so the farm's actually been in my family since 1716. It was an original land grant from Lord Fairfax to our direct ancestors.
Right?
I suppose so.
I still got the...
We were trying to get away from that.
No, keep going.
So, a family came over here, and it was an original land grant from Lord Fairfax in 1716. And we've been able to keep the farm since 9 generations. And it's got an old log cabin on it that was built late 1700s and was renovated in 1955 by a student of Frank Lloyd Wright. So it's a really, really neat little property. And when my great aunt passed away in 2005, she left it to my mother and I, and we really almost lost the farm due to inheritance taxes. You have 90 days to come up with cash to pay. So here was a property that had been our family for 300 years almost, and we almost lost it. So we were able to kind of string together some things and bail it out and save it, but it prompted us to really have the question, what are we going to do with this place? Is it going to survive one more generation and that's it? Or can we turn it into some type of business? And it had an agricultural zoning in Fairfax County, an agricultural by right. And so we started exploring some different businesses, alpaca farm or, a dairy farm or this and that. And obviously I'd kind of just come out of college. I was 23 years old at the time, and wine seemed like a fun thing. And I enjoyed drinking it, but really didn't know how to make it. So, we kind of set off on an adventure to learn how to do it. And the industry at the time was just kind of up and coming, and I believe there were, less than 150 wineries in the state at the time. And we ended up meeting the right people that said, you can do this. And we kind of took that challenge, and I wrote a business plan, got turned down by 10 banks, and the 11th one gave us the money to do it. And next thing you know, we were planting a vineyard and we were getting going, and Fairfax County came and said, nope, you can't do it. And it was this same kind of anomaly where they agreed that growing grapes was agriculture, but all the subsequent things that go along with a winery, people coming to visit, to taste, to tour, to have people actually come to your facility, the processing and manufacturing of it, they didn't deem that agriculture. And again, I remember sitting at the district attorney's desk, and she handed me this big zoning manual and said, here you go. And I was like, what do I need this for? And so we ended up in a 2-year litigation battle with the county over our rights to open. And at the end of 2 years, we won. And I always kind of knew we were going to win. The state law for Virginia farm wineries was pretty sound. It specifically calls out and says that localities cannot regulate farm wineries. And so all the things they were trying to say that we couldn't do were clearly agriculture, and we had a right to do, but we had to get up and out of the county court to a state court for a state judge to deem that. So that was a great day. And we finally opened in early 2010. And I remember there was snow on the ground and everything. Not a great time to open a winery, but we were ready. So, and we never looked back. So,
now, in fighting that fight with the county and the legislature, did you pave the way for others to make it an easier path?
So yeah, there's now another winery in Fairfax County, Bull Run. So we were the first, and they kind of followed suit. And after we got over kind of the initial court case, I'll give the Board of Supervisors credit that they kind of called off the dogs and said, let's give it a chance. And we ended up working with the county, and everyone's been really proud of it. I think we've been a great addition, a great diversity to the county, and making some great product, and hopefully, make them proud. So I think we've proven ourselves as a proven entity.
So how about the challenge of coming into a business that already had 150 wineries at that moment? How did you actually make friends and play in the same area?
Yeah, and that's what I think that goes back. It's what is unique about this industry, and I think you guys see it as well, that we all want to help each other out. Farming is difficult. I mean, heck, we had a hurricane bearing down on us just this week, and we're all out there picking and helping each other. Hey, can I borrow some bins? Can I do this? We're all in this together, and I think we all feel that. And there's enough market share out there in the wine industry and really the alcohol spirits industry that Virginia, all ships rise with a rising tide. And we feel that, if we can grow the brand of Virginia wine or Virginia beer, Virginia distilleries, we're really facing that import market as our real competition, and that we're kind of all on that same train to grow Virginia as a region that makes good beverage, local beverages, especially local wine.
So when you talk about market share, are you talking about the Virginia wine, Virginia population, or you?
Yeah. So some of the statistics that have come out, I mean, really only 5% of the wine that gets drunk in Virginia is Virginia wine. Mm-hmm. So if you think about that, we have a 95% market share that we can still go after. So our real big competition is education, what we're doing here and why supporting local, and how, when you make a craft, a smaller scale type of product, there's a lot more attention to detail that goes into it. There's less, additives. Everyone asks, what's the difference between your wine and a Trader Joe's $5 bottle? Why wouldn't I just go buy that? And people don't realize how mass produced that is, the chemicals, the additives, the things that go into that. To get a consistent flavor across the board in a larger subset of a product that has to go all around the country and all around the world. So there's a difference, and there's a reason why you support local.
Now you have probably if I understand the business correctly, you have the most labor-intensive of the three.
Yes, I mean, we get one shot a year to make a product.
And where do you get your labor workforce from? Is there a sufficient supply? We talked about hiring 2 of these events ago, and we know that there's a very hard labor supply out there. So
yeah, it's difficult. I mean, we truly are a farm product. What's in this bottle is 100% grown. And if you think about that, it's an agricultural entity. A grape can be grown one time a year on a vine, and you got to hope that you have perfect weather throughout it all, that there's no, frost damage early in the season or hail that comes sometimes, it nicks the grape and it rots away. So everything has to work perfectly, and you get one chance a year to make wine, which is really right now. We've been bringing fruit in all week, and we'll continue to do so after this week. But this is our shot to make a product for an entire year. So if you could imagine a restaurant, could you imagine if you went into a restaurant and asked a chef and said, listen, over the next 2 weeks, you're going to make every dish that people have to eat for the next year plus, and you better get it right. That's the type of pressure that we face. And so, it starts in the vineyard in the wintertime, and all year long you're kind of moving that along and doing the best that you can, and hope that, the product at the end of the day is grown properly. And then once you harvest that product and bring it in, you've got a manufacturing component to it. And once you've manufactured it well, you've got to package it up, market it well, and hope that people come out and enjoy it and purchase it to keep you in business and keep the cycle going. So
we're in that cycle now, aren't we?
We're in the harvesting stage. So harvesting, and then...
He looks very calm, doesn't he?
I didn't look this way yesterday. Yeah. But, we're harvesting in and processing over the next really 2 months. So if you come to the winery, there's a lot of activity.
And tell us about the products you've got with you today.
Yeah, so we just brought a couple of our wines to show. We make about 15 different wines a year here in Virginia, from whites to reds to a dry French-style rosé. We do a lot of blends in Virginia, and everyone asks, what's the difference in Virginia winemaking? And really, there's an unpredictability to our weather, as you guys can see with a hurricane coming up. They don't deal with that in California or, in France. And so, as winemakers, we really have to be open to a blank slate, a blank canvas every year. There's no recipe that we follow. We have to look at the grape and what Mother Nature has given us and really react to that and produce in a way that is going to make the best wine possible. And so, one way that we do it one year might be totally different the next from a methodology standpoint in production to make the best product that we can. And so, it's a unique industry. You don't have a consistent product year in and year out, but that's kind of fun. There's vintages that are unbelievably stellar, and then there's vintages where we as winemakers will get creative and can make different products, different styles of rosé, or, an orange wine, which is actually a white wine fermented on the skins. So it's kind of the fun of a local industry and visiting the local wineries here in Virginia.
You have to continuously reinvent yourself almost.
Yeah, you do. As good as you can make a product one year, you've got to start fresh the next, and so it's a humbling business sometimes.
Do you know this lovely lady?
I do.
You do? Oh, okay. So my job is done here.
Well, we're a little newer friends, I guess. And, the interesting part, so wineries, with all the wineries popping up in the counties, so many in Loudoun and a couple now in Fairfax, it's a big competition for hotels with venues and with event space. So all of the brides have this vision that they want to get married in a barn or a winery or something really, rustic and things. So it's a challenge with the hotels, but what we've done to kind of combat that is just building the relationships. And, we kind of partner with sleeping rooms because we can house their guests, and we can do the rehearsal dinner where the winery can do the wedding, or vice versa. So, just hoping to build relationships with Paradise Springs, and, we talked to Bull Run and some of the other wineries. So, it's just, again, the industry is small. We all kind of come together and know each other at certain points, and, and also the product. I mean, if someone wants a Virginia wine at their wedding, it's great to be able to partner with that and to give them that experience. It's the same with craft cocktails. I mean, all the brides and grooms are very savvy, and their palates are become more sophisticated, and they want what they want. So, we end up doing different craft his and hers cocktails for their wedding, and signature drinks and things of that nature. So it's really, it's kind of evolved. The client has evolved as well.
Great. Well, it's wonderful that you all work together. So
yeah, and one of the challenges we have in Virginia wine is, unlike the beer and spirits industry, is the wholesale distribution. I mean, we do a lot with direct to consumer and rely on consumers coming to us, experiencing, tasting, and being able to sell direct to them. The marketplace is so incredibly competitive when it comes to distribution of wines. You have cheap Argentinian Malbec coming in that we just can't compete on a price level with to the consumer. And so, it's really about educating, people about what we're doing and the quality that we're doing, and then getting people behind it, and having, everyone go out and order Virginia wine. Ask your restaurant sommelier to, do you have any Virginia wine? And those are how really we're going to make ends into that realm. But for now, it's a lot of direct to consumer, and we rely on that tourism of people coming out to see what we do.
Great. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
You make a wonderful barfly. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Take a seat down there. I'm going to lift this chair, bring this chair. And I'd like to ask you if you've got any questions or comments or words of wisdom.
There are a couple operations that have brewery, winery operations on site together. They're licensed separately, and sometimes you have to drink, a beer in a certain designed area. But there are a few out there throughout Virginia, and more, I think the industries are collaborating. ABC just last year allows for what's called a manufacturer's license now, and I know 8 times a year at our winery, up to 3 days in a row, we're allowed to have a brewery come in a designated area and serve and sell beer. My brother has a brewery as well, and so often we have him come and pour some of his stuff. So I'd say just, look around on websites and try to follow what the individual places are doing, but there are definitely the combos out there, and then people that can do that as well.
There was another question here. James?
Can I just add to that? The General Assembly did change, General Assembly didn't change it. Virginia ABC changed interpretation of existing rules so that if you are a winery and a brewery owned by the same entity, you can mix consumption now. And Vanish Brewery in Loudoun and Quattro Goomba in Loudoun are both a winery and brewery, and you can consume both on site.
Val, they heard you.
I think, and you can jump in too, I think we see the gamut. I mean, we have a Crooked Run that started in Loudoun that was literally like micro nano. Their tasting room was about half the size of this stage. And then we have Solace, who is Drew Wiles, it's Kurt's brother, and they've expanded production 2 times. And you walk in there, and I don't even know how many square feet that place is. 15,000 square feet. So, it runs the gamut. It is all shapes and all sizes, which is what I think is beautiful. And I think that's the great thing about our wine industry too, because people come to me all the time and say, what's your favorite winery? What's your favorite brewery? And I'm like, well, first of all, I'm not going to tell you that. But second of all, what kind of experience do you want to have? Who are you going with? What kind of beer do you like? Because there is a winery and a brewery for everyone. And I think that's the great part of it.
It's interesting because there's so many rules that apply to alcohol that you have to constantly do this Venn diagram and figure out if you're all, you've got all those overlapping circles satisfied. The licensing, they license you as a brewery, they license you as a vineyard, I think, right? And then they don't put a cap on you. So your cap is a physical cap. And then when you're looking at your operations, you've got to figure out if you can get zoned for the model that you're building toward. So if you're planning on being a 20,000 barrel a year brewery, then you'd want to get that zoning approval to allow for you to be able to be a 20,000 barrel beer or a year brewery, or you're just never going to get there. So it really is more of a physical constraint and then a zoning issue.
So I can talk a little bit about that. It's funny because I was at a farm conference with Kelly, I forget where, somewhere in the middle of Winchester or something like that, yeah. And they were talking about, it was from the perspective of the farmers. So there's all this craft beverage coming up. What should we be planting to get the most literal bang for our buck? Of course, we're interested in grain, rye grain. But this particular conference had said that grapes, so if you look at the growth of Virginia wineries, it was like a line like this, and the amount of grapes produced in Virginia was like this. So all that space under the graph was like unmet need. There's a lot of, wineries that either, are taking grapes from elsewhere to make their thing. So of course, that's a very difficult crop. You can't just say, well, I'm going to put grapes in the ground and be successful. So that was one of them. The other was apples, and it's somewhat ironic because the cider industry, which we haven't talked much about today, has been growing as well, quite a lot. And the irony is that just at the time that they pretty much leveled and took away all those orchards, like in Winchester and all this place that used to be predominant apple country, now cider's back. And so they've lost a lot of those orchards, and so they were saying if you plant cider apples, that could be quite good too.
We're allowed to ferment anything from fruit. So we can make cider in-house. We can do blueberry wine, strawberry wine, peach wine. And so there are a lot of wineries exploring with different fruits, growing and kind of doing their own unique thing. There's a full cidery association now in Virginia, and the cider funds actually come back and are supported by the Virginia Wine Board. So cider is definitely a growing industry in the strait as well. Oh yeah, it's a good point we didn't talk about that.
I just think from the beer perspective, I think the breweries are doing amazing beers with different products. I mean, everybody has a pumpkin ale, and if you can use fresh local pumpkins, that's fantastic. We have a brewery in Loudoun, this summer asked me about raspberries, local raspberries, and local watermelon. So anything that you can ferment and turn into alcohol is a possibility. It's really limited by the creativity of the distiller, the fermenter, and the brewer.
So for us, just our posture, we care about repeatability. So for us, if we're looking at raw goods, we need to know that we can get repeatability out of the raw goods so that our final product is also repeatable. So to the extent that so our preference always is to source local first, right? And right now, we tend to source local to those things that we know will be accepted as a variance in our product. So if we are making something with blackberries, or if we're making something with coffee, that's going to be a variance that everybody expects, and that's great because now we can source local. If we got to a point where it was hops, that might be a variable that somebody might accept, but it might not be. And that's where we start to look for consistency, so quality control starts to come in. When it comes to grain, that's really hard for us. That's very difficult for us to source locally right now. And in the future, that'd be terrific.
Great, thank you.
So we are being recorded, aren't we? I always say there's nothing to do in Loudoun County. We don't have a theme park. We don't have a casino. People come to Loudoun County for our agriculture-based economy. They come to Loudoun for the wineries and the breweries and the distilleries. It would be great if we had some other great venue for people to come to. And now, as Sharon was saying, people are coming to Loudoun to get married. And we, every weekend, I don't want to say this probably out loud because our elected officials are probably listening. There's probably 50 weddings a weekend on wineries and breweries in barns in Loudoun County. And, it has become, the rural economy and the ag-based economy in Loudoun has become our tourism brand. We are DC's wine country, and now we are DC's beer country. And so our tourism, Visit Loudoun works hand in hand with economic development. We have a really great relationship with them. I said I had to pull these numbers this morning because it feels like they change every week. We're talking to Visit Loudoun, when they're printing a new pocket guide for the breweries, they're like, what's coming on board? What can we list in the new pocket guide as coming soon? So it's a really great relationship. And on the business side, we work closely. The commercial side, who's trying to bring in large corporate headquarters, they're working with Visit Loudoun for those room nights too. So it's a really, really close relationship in Loudoun between economic development and our tourism.
Yeah, and working, with Visit Fairfax, they've been great bringing people out to us. And I think just being, a farm winery in Fairfax County kind of showcases the diversity of the county. You have everything from Tyson's Corner, which has become the next great city and metro, to being able to come out on a farm with a 1700s log cabin and watch an ancient process of crushing grapes and fermenting wine is kind of cool. So I think the diversity that we can bring to Fairfax County and working with the tourism is great, and it's great to say we have a few wineries as well.
Yeah, so for us, it depends on which product we're creating. So if it's one of the cores, repeatability is huge, quality control is huge. We need to know that the raw goods that we're getting are going to give us a predictable result. So, and then as we move down the line to some of the more creative things that we do, our general approach to it is try to source it more local, try to collab more local, really try to make it more of a project. So cores are cores. The fun stuff is where we really do have some fun. Once we get to the fun stuff, that's where we really do try to get creative. So we're behind the 8 ball on this one, but we just brewed a robust coffee vanilla porter. And what we're looking for is a coffee roaster collab partner. And we're reaching out to DC and Virginia coffee roasters. And the whole concept of this is that we would get a cold brew coffee that we're really, so first we're trying to get the partner that really wants to make this a project and really engage with us. And then we're going to do it as a collaboration. We're literally going to create the recipe together, sit at a table, we're going to bring different versions of the beer as we are getting closer to the final product, hopefully to figure out dosing rates, to figure out what it is that we're really looking for between the roaster and what we have as a product, and then ultimately create it. And that's, to me, fun, right? That's where we have a local brewery, a local coffee roaster. We can have a complete amount of fun with it, and all of a sudden the project aspect of it comes in. It's less repeatability and more this could be really special.
Scott?
So for our purposes, when we first started, we love doing things the hard way. So we chose to be an organic certified distillery. And when we first started, there was 0 organic grain available to us from Virginia. And so when we first started, we were getting mostly grain from Kansas. And but it was always a founding mission of ours to source locally and to try to get that. And so over the 9 years that we've been working with the Department of Economic Development, with the ag departments and VDACs at the state level, we've been able to do that. And so today, I'm very happy to say that we have 3 Virginia farms that we work with, Eastern Shore, Rappahannock, and Loudoun County, a very small farm in Loudoun County. But we also are sourcing, the 4th farm is from Lancaster, PA, so Amish country. So when we think local, we draw like a 100-mile radius circle, and that to us is local. So that's been very important to us. We also make brandy. Brandy is basically fermented wine from fruit and then distilled. And in our brandy, all of that is extremely hyper-local. So peaches from Bluemont Vineyards, which is Great Country Farms, about 6 miles from our distillery. Pears from Patton House Farm, which is Doug Fabioli doing the wine for us up in Leesburg. Apples from Richmond, so Richmond, the Blue Bee Cidery down in downtown Richmond, wonderful cider manufacturer. And then grapes. We work with many local Virginia, mostly Loudoun, winemakers to make wine that we will then make into brandy. And so we've been doing that since day one. So that sourcing of local fruit, working with those local purveyors. But on our side also, there's another aspect of working with local farmers. All of our spent mash from our rye, so this is basically, you can think of it as a non-alcoholic, formerly alcoholic, but non-alcoholic porridge that we give to local farms as free cattle feed. And that mash goes out to the farms. The one that we're most proud of, there's many that we work with, but the one we're most proud of is Sarah Brown at Oakland Green in Lincoln. A 9th generation Quaker farm. She's been farming with her family on that land since 1750. So another great farm story there. And we just feel really good about supporting her with free food for her cows. And she gives me a freezer full of beef every year. So that's pretty awesome too. So I can't complain.
Yeah, and being a local winery, obviously, we grow all of our fruit here in Virginia. So everything that we produce and bottle here in Virginia is Virginia grown. When we first started, we worked with a multitude of growers, obviously, that had established vineyards to be able to bring in, fruit that was established already as we kind of started acquiring and planting more and more ourselves. So today we have a vineyard out in Shenandoah that's 68 acres producing, and we actually just purchased another 54 acres next door that we'll continue to plant. So it's from the time you put a grapevine in the ground, you're really looking at 5 years till you get anything of quality off that product. off that vine, and then you're another year or two in production. So kind of a 7-year life cycle to get a quality wine from the time you plant that vine. But everything we do in Virginia here is Virginia grown, and we're proud of that.
I'm going to ask you all to consider the word, because this is the Inner Word series. And as that's happening, let's wrap this up, starting with Kelly. What is your word for the inner word for cheers?
I am so happy that I get to go first,
Yes.
so nobody else takes my word. My word is fermented.
Fermented. Good. Kirk.
The word's supposed to be about the event, correct?
It's about this topic.
I would say my word is perseverance. I think all of us up here have persevered through wanting to follow our dreams and do something unique, and it's not easy. So we all face different challenges, and we've all persevered.
I'm going to take this word before it gets taken. So I would say crafted, and with that I'm wrapping up the whole thing of my family is doing this business, we working from dawn till dusk most days, just like an oil painter might spend a lot of time laboring over a painting or something like that. There's a great deal of care that goes into every single drop that we produce. So I'd say crafted is really important.
Super.
I wasn't going to take that. So I'd say cool. It's pretty neat that all these local craft businesses have burgeoned up and they're available. And I agree, they're persevering. And but it's really great that I'd love a day where we could all collaborate and kind of do something really cool together. So, anyways.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And my word to all of you is cheers. And with that, I'd like to thank our wonderful guests. Please join me.
My father just wasn't as sharp as he used to be. He seemed not to be part of our conversations. He was more forgetful. He seemed sometimes disoriented. He was repetitive. So was it depression? Was it normal aging? Was it hearing loss? Was it everything?
We see people from, young adulthood all the way into their 90s, but we do see a lot of people who are worried about their memory and are starting to experience some memory problems, so they come to us so that we can help clarify whether this is just normal aging or a little bit of stress, or is it something more serious and something that needs some treatment.
And months later, things weren't any different. In fact, they were worse. We were seeing those behaviors more frequently. So my mother called the doctor, and the family doctor had a discussion with them, and the word dementia came up.
Yeah, that's a tough time when you're trying to figure out what's going on and feeling very alone, and it's been really good for me to be able to have the Insight Memory Care Center as a place to refer people for that kind of support. It's a very comprehensive program, I've thought, that can provide the education and make people feel less alone, and then the people to interact with, to talk to, and then also all the resources you have for the professionals that they might need in their lives at that particular time.
And we went online and looked at the whole website, and we found your educational classes, and the one that popped up was the first class that was happening in the beginning of this year, and it was, is forgetfulness a problem? So we read the description, and the first thing it said, is it normal aging or is it dementia? So we continued to read, and then it talked about the differences of the different forms of dementia, and then it was also going to talk about when you need to get help.
What we always try to do is start from the beginning. As we have new caregivers hearing about Insight, we want to make sure that we are starting with that initial diagnosis, carrying them all the way through.
So my sister and I registered. We went to the class. It was excellent. It was in layman's terms. We were with other people who were at the same phase we were. And we walked out, we called our mom back in Pennsylvania and said, you need to schedule an appointment with a neurologist.
I would hope for people that they could find Insight early in the process, as early as possible, and then have that support all the way through.
But if it wasn't for here, I think we'd still be wondering what was the next step we needed to do once we received the diagnosis.
Then our education classes are free for the public. You don't have to be enrolled in Insight to be able to attend one of the classes. You can attend all the classes, and some caregivers do. They just want that knowledge.
The educational programs are so helpful. They serve so many needs, not just in terms of providing like the latest cutting edge research or, you know, professionals in the field getting the opportunity to share their knowledge with people that it really affects. But it also just gets people together and gets them talking and asking questions, and so they feel more part of a community that's there for them, and it's just an amazing resource.
They have a community of people that they can turn to who are going through the same thing, that can really understand what they're going through.
Learn as much as you can. Become friends with the people who come here on a monthly basis. They do become your support group as well. We laugh, we cry, we talk about our wins and our losses, but most of all, we all comfort each other. But finding a place like Insight is the #1 thing you need to do.
When Cornerstones was established in 1970, its founders recognized that even in a community where people are welcomed and are welcoming, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, or socioeconomic background, people could work hard and still not earn enough to support their families, that there would always be hungry people or people in crisis. Many in our community are just one unexpected life event away from living in their car or on a friend's couch or on the street. No one plans on being homeless.
My life before, I was the owner of a big pharmacy in Washington, D.C. In August of 2010, I discovered an embezzlement of several $million. And by the summer of 2014, I have lost everything. The house and my business. We have yet to leave the house in Great Falls. And in October 4th of 2014, we entered the Embry Riker Center. My first impression was a surprise. It was a pleasant surprise. The people were very, very nice. I got a nice welcome. And we got a nice room. And my biggest surprise was the food. There was a kitchen with 4 ladies cooking fresh food 3 times a day. And my biggest pleasant surprise was my case manager. He provided a lot of love and psychological support, and he explained to me all the services that Cornerstone is providing for the homeless people.
Our comprehensive programs provide stability to people in times of crisis, resources that promote empowerment for moving forward, and hope for the future. At Cornerstones, we meet people wherever they are, without judgment.
Now I have my home. My daughter, she's in school, she's very good. She's gonna go university. My husband, good job working. Now I'm thinking to go to university, to finish my university, and to find good job after that.
Providing stability is only the first step. Where Cornerstones is different from other organizations is in providing the gift of time and resources that continue after the immediate crisis has passed. Cornerstones empowers people to take the next step in what is often a longer journey to well-being through their own hard work and the tenacious support of Cornerstone staff, volunteers, and partners. And we see the difference that makes every day.
I become a citizen and I enjoy the class, and it's helped me also. My English is become better and I speak better now, and I understand also people when they talking. And after that, I interested and I help her in the class. When I become citizen, I still come every week and help in the class.
When we got the place, the Cornerstone has been extremely supportive to us. They furnished the house because I didn't have anything left. new beds, tons of food, and any supply you can imagine. My case manager came here, brought cleaning things, sheets and clothes and food. So the ladies came here, they fixed everything for us. So it was an easy and very pleasant transition from the shelter to this place. And I'm very appreciative.
These individuals can imagine a future they thought out of reach and can begin to make goals for a better future. Goals we all share for ourselves and for our children. Goals that are possible with the support and partnership that you provide.
Immediately when we moved to the community, we knew that Cornerstones was going to be an excellent partner and build a strong relationship with us. We've been very involved with the organization, whether it's volunteering at the Embry-Rucker shelter, or participating in the Help to Homeless walks, and just frankly helping to secure affordable housing for those individuals living in our community. It's such a critical need to build a better Reston.
Cornerstones is proud of the role we play as a participant, convener, interconnector, and advocate, bringing people and sectors together to solve some of our region's most challenging problems. Our readiness program for job seekers has been adopted countywide, and with our business leaders, we're defining the skill sets needed for our current and future workforce. With Reston's Opportunity Neighborhood Initiative, Cornerstones is working along with our partners to see that all children thrive in a healthy start in life and are prepared to excel in school and career. And true to Cornerstone's founders, we believe that our job is to end homelessness, not just manage it, by developing housing that is affordable for people over their entire lifetime. Together with our partners, we have reduced homelessness in Fairfax County by 47%. We remain firmly rooted in the Reston community goals handed down by its founder. We apply the value that all may live, work, play, and serve in the many areas which Cornerstones operates today.
Cornerstone, it's a very, very important organization. Based on my experience, is providing a tremendous help to needy people. And I cannot express in words how appreciative I am for what Cornerstone has provided for me and my son. And most of all is, besides again all the material things we get, is the love and the attention we get from the case management.
It's like I'm become like, now I'm doing things, I'm happy. Yeah.